Okay, guys and girls, wonderful, amazing, hello, it's me, great and glorious, soon to be famous one day, Nick Dutch, back on the camera again one more time. Professional tarot reader par excellence, in my humble opinion only. And what I'd like to do today is to just talk about stuff. Okay, I want to talk about stuff in a way which I think is different, because if we think back to like the energy which I used to express on this YouTube channel when I was, way back in the day, when my face looks a bit like younger, and I looked a bit sort of younger, and everything was, it was about 15, 16 years ago, okay, when I first properly came onto the internet. What I was doing was two things simultaneously. Number one, I was explaining stuff, but I was also being critical of stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why people get rather confused by me as an individual. They don't quite know what I think. But on the other hand, I'm a proper human being who actually is growing all the time. And there are numerous different levels of thinking when it comes to me as a person. So I'm not going to give you a singular dogmatic interpretation of stuff, because I don't want to do that, and I regard that as rather unethical as well, for various reasons, which I could go into now, but some of it might just slip out, Freudian stuff coming out of my mouth in terms of why I think this or why I think that at that time. But let's just go back onto the subject of stuff. With traditional videos about things like runestones and tarot cards and Ouija boards and pendulums and radionics, it appears that the explanation which is given is rather clear-cut. The Ace of Cups means this, okay? The Suit of Staves means that. And many of these, sorry, I've got a cat who's trying to get my attention. Oh dear. But there is a problem with that. It's not necessarily true. One thing I will say is that when you're going through the process of studying various forms of symbolism, that's a very good way of compartmentalizing your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, and trying to structure it in terms of whatever particular ancient or theological symbolism you've managed to pick up with the passage of time. And if you're in a group of people who are following the same books or the same whatever, they're bound to have a relatively singular idea as to what various things mean. Now, the reason why I think that this is such a complexity, and it is so restrictive, is because it's just plain wrong. Because different cultures, different denominations, so to speak, different nations with their own spiritual practices, and even individuals who perceive the same thing but from a different point of view will come up with very different interpretations. As I mentioned years ago, the colour blue, for instance. What does it actually mean? In some tribal societies, blue is associated with despair. In our society, it might be associated with cleanliness, because we always go into the pharmacy and seeing various different products which are in blue packaging, talking about cleanliness and cleanliness and health or well-being. So does blue really have a specific meaning? We could say that it grows in interpretation. It grows with the passage of time, and in different eras it will mean different things. But you can't specifically pick up, let's say, a form of art, any form of art, whether it is some kind of ancient 300-year-old Grand Master or something, or indeed a church image, or indeed a tarot image, and then assume that you understand what the use of the colour blue is in that. Let's also think about modern art. Modern art is fun. I like modern art. But on the other hand, it can sometimes seem quite meaningless unless you read those tiny little pieces of card which is stuck beside the work of art in the gallery, if you get my drift. That then provides some particular context, but only the context and the point of view of that particular artist and what they're trying to convince us that particular work of art means. Isn't that right, pussycat? Yes, isn't that right? Yes, that's right, yes. So then, now let's take that subject and put it aside for the minute, and then go on to the next subject, which is people in spiritual groups, let's say, and their own interpretation of stuff. I mean, I remember a song that was done by a group, I can't remember which one it was. They did some wonderful things, you know, the Eight Fire Festivals type songs and, you know, fun, folky sort of pagan type stuff, which didn't always make sense, but was still quite atmospheric and quite fun. And one of the lines was, I'm a high-tech witch, tradition is old hat. And the idea was that the person who thought that would have something which doesn't work, as opposed to the people who say they're following traditions, who say that what they do does work. Do you see what I'm getting at here? It's almost like there is this subtle intention within that song to try and control the individual who's listening to it, and to make them feel superstitiously full of dread if they don't follow a particular tradition in a particular way. I still regard that as being a restriction on intellectual and emotional freedom, choice, and also you as an individual looking after yourself. Quite substantially. There's this other word which has come into the whole sort of like New Age culture in a much more real way in recent years, and that is the word intention, which I think is useful, intelligent, and also curious. Why is it that the word intention is suddenly, or semi-suddenly, okay, much more of a thing? Does it actually make more sense to think about these things in terms of intention? Let's say someone's asked you a question for a tarot reading. You therefore start to have an intention to try and find the answer. And if not to try and find the answer, then to try and find some creative problem-solving thinking, using the symbolism which is in front of you to try and provide that answer. Maybe intention has much more impact than, let's say, following a tradition or reading a book which tells you you've got to do this, that, and the other. So this is what my argument really is. When we're talking about attempts to communicate with the dead or with spirits or whatever it is, when we're talking about an exercise of ritual magic or whatever it is, alright, are we focusing too much on tradition? Are we focusing too much on our anxiety, which is created by all these people who are pulling you in different directions, telling you to do this, that, and the other, rather than working out how to purify and rarefy the concept of intention within you? That experience that I had way back in my teenage years, when I made a wish to see glimpses of the future in my dreams, which actually happened for quite a long period of time after that instance. That was generated, so it seems, as a result of me chanting and meditating in the quiet at home for a period of about 10 minutes. But building up the intensity, building up the energy, and inside the back of my mind I could feel myself formulating what this wish would be, what it would look like, so to speak, how it would operate, so to speak. And then when I made the wish, it felt like pew, there was this like subtle fire, energy, ball of light pew, coming out of me and going out into the rest of the universe, as if to do something which I made happen. So let's think about the stages there. Number one, having an idea. Stupid little idea a teenager's had, okay? Number two, putting myself into a state whereby I'm relaxed enough and I can focus on it, no one else was around, so I couldn't be distracted, and it was therefore fun. Use meditation, use mantra, repeat the mantra, keep my mind focused on the mantra as long as possible. And then have this intention which was being refined during the process of the chanting to the point whereby I make a wish. And when I did so, I think I willfully made that, energetic explosion seem to happen, which then caused the start of some prophetic dreams, which was very frightening for me, very frightening indeed, but also very interesting. And of course, it's one of those experiences which brings me to be what I am today in many different ways. Does that make sense? Because I've had lots of other things happening. Angel experiences, ghost experiences, astral projection experiences. These things have just happened to me. I've got more questions. I've had spiritual healing experiences when I felt the energy from way back in, actually Glastonbury '94, I think it was, when I went to the spiritual healing tent and I had laying on of hands and I could feel energy flowing where, I could physically feel this stuff. Okay, these experiences have happened to me. And I will always have questions about them and about what it means to be a human on the strength of these particular experiences. But what if that healer had a defined intention? What if that healer, instead of thinking to herself, oh my God, what colour shall I be visualizing now? She was dealing with intention to drain the body of negative energy, bring in some light or whatever it was. What if it's much more important to have the intention rather than the symbol? Okay? With wonderful, cool toys like what we got here. Alright, 40 Servants by Tommy Kelly, Lesser Key of Solomon, 72 Demons. I haven't got them on my desk at the moment, but there's the Angel Tarot deck, there's the Occult Tarot deck, which has all the 72 spirits from the Lesser Key of Solomon in their sigils and in their artwork. Maybe these things are much less important than tradition says. Maybe in your early days, you go through the process of training yourself with traditions. Maybe that's just a kindergarten. Maybe that's just a way for you to explore how to build up the intention, or how to define the intention. But after a while, does it necessarily matter what runestones you're visualizing or what? We've got 1,000,001 traditions and interpretations to play with. But these things are to be played with. Alright, because if you don't, and you become a dogmatic follower of this particular shade of blue means this, and therefore it can't mean anything else, and if anyone says anything else, then that goes against my experience, and therefore they must be because, my teacher, this book, or whatever it was, said so. Now, me having said that is one thing, but then there may still be things in the universe, so to speak, of like energy and thoughts and feelings and ideas, which has in some respects some hard and fast truth. When I did experimentation with crystals on my chakras, I placed the large white clear quartz over the orange chakra when I was lying in bed. After a time, I could feel heat pouring through me. Pouring. It's as if placing the clear quartz on the orange chakra was setting energy lines straight, or controlling the flow of energy and healing the part of my energy field, so to speak, which deals with the manipulation of energy. So to a certain extent, we could say maybe that the aura does have organs which have specific functions and needs healing and addressing at various different times of your life. And as you go through life and growth and change, there is adjustments to the aura. Maybe. And maybe that is part of the process of spiritual healing. We could say that. But this is still to a certain extent hypothetical though, isn't it? Okay? What was my intention when I placed that clear quartz crystal on my orange chakra? Well, I had built up an understanding of what the orange chakra could be about, and I built up an understanding of what clear quartz could do. Maybe there's a connection there, if we were to just look at it from the point of view of psychology and symbolism. Because I had an idea and therefore there was some kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Possibly, but not certainly. So I'm sitting in this position in my life when I recognize the unpleasantness and the restriction of tradition. But I can also see that there is, to a certain extent, some merit to it, because it can help you to codify intention. Alright? An intention with a focused mind, if you can do it, if you're lucky, if your meditation is deep enough, sometimes, just sometimes, seems to do some pretty incredible things. All the other toys and tools that I've got, like the radionics apparatus, the tarot, the runes, the old grimoires, you know, less Key of Solomon, basically. All of these things were written by people who were attempting to understand the universe. All these devices, the original devices, were made by people attempting to try and understand the universe, and having what they regard as being successes. Some greater than others, but still some successes. But if we bring our mind back to intention and energy raising, maybe that's where the real goodness actually happens. Now, I don't know what you think. You don't know everything about what I think yet. Maybe you will one day, I don't know. And if I have said something in this particular video which makes you feel uncomfortable, I would like to take this opportunity to apologize. However, I think I've got a point here. And I feel that it is important for people to work more with meditation and more with intention and good codified definitions than necessarily to focus too much on traditions, whether they're traditions of tarot, whether they're traditions of runes, whether they're traditions of whatever. Maybe it's worthwhile putting that aside. I think one question that we as a species have to ask ourselves is, why do we lean on tradition so much? Maybe it makes us feel comfortable. Maybe it gives us a sense of identity, but that's a sense of identity. That's not specifically an identity though, is it? It's a sense of it. Maybe it connects us to a political intention. All these things have importance. But I think there's a difference between importance and important. I also think that there's an awful lot of forces in the world that are quite keen on using you. Maybe manipulating you. Maybe even hurting you. And there's an awful lot of sickness amongst the cultures of people who are involved in all this weird stuff. Why is that? Because they need healing. And sometimes they try and heal themselves through hurting others. I don't necessarily think it is their intention to do harm. But some people have got rearrangements of the body and mind which makes them more likely to do something stupid and detrimental to you. Okay? Where do you want to go with your interests? Who do you want to help with your interests? What do you wish to achieve and why? I'm asking you the questions so that you can find the answers yourself. Because I'm not here to tell you what to think. But I am to encourage you to think about what you're thinking and why, and whether it serves you. That was the serious bit of talking over and done with. Now let's get on with something more fun. By way of discussion. What would the perfect Ouija board look like? Not like that. At all. Why? Because it is too heavily theological. It's got your pentagram in the middle of it. Not necessary. It's got a little bit of astrology thrown in, male and female, Venus and Mars. Not really necessary. What else has it got? The sun and the moon. Not necessary. Okay? In my opinion, as this is an ideomotor device and a device for introspective contemplation about what ideas are being, either appearing to you or being driven to you, it should be plain. I think it should be pure white with black, very simple lettering on it. I think it should have no symbolism at all, and I think it should have a very good surface to slide off. I've even got a few issues with this one here, even though it's very beautiful, being made of wood. I would want to have as few forms of patterning on there to distract the mind. Essentially, my impression of the ideal Ouija board or talking board or ideomotor device would be very clinical, because I would want intention and point of view and thoughts and feelings to be much more in the ascent, shall we say, rather than concerns about patterning, concerns about whether it's got the right theological imagery on it. Fine. But that would be my ideal talking board for, as you might assume, just attempting to have a genuine experiment to see what happens when you place your fingers on the planchette and so on and so forth. But, and this is where I'm going to sound totally hypocritical because I'm a human being and there isn't a single human being in the world who isn't hypocritical. Think about it, okay? It's true. I like them as works of art. I like them. I was even thinking of getting like a vampire one for Halloween, maybe. That would be a laugh. That would be fun. I like kitsch imagery, but not for something serious. Okay. Why is it that I like the runes so much? The little rune stones, you can't see them here. I'll get out one of the cards and show you one of those instead. Because it has very little imagery on it. It's just got a single letter, which could have some phonetic element to it. You could have different associations with it, but it's simple. It's singular. It's as it were silent. There's nothing else to distract you. But sometimes you can get too much going on which distracts you. When I was doing the readings with the rune cards, I think there's a bit too much going on there. Alright, what should you be focusing in on? Should it be the runic symbol itself? Should it be the artwork? What in the artwork attracts the eye? What kind of message, what kind of meaning? Is there something singular or elemental, shall we say, in terms of meaning? No, it's a very confusing piece of art. And that artwork itself, created by the individual, is trying to bring you into an understanding based upon their art. That's good, and that's bad at the same time. Great for when I'm doing videos, but like for anything serious, it doesn't have the right thing going for it. I was thinking back to the very early days for me. Not my early days of experiences with weird things happening, but my early days with attending on a face-to-face basis people within the pagan and occult community. A lot of the stuff going on there was like fashion. It was the appearance. It was the crushed green velvet. It was the silver crescent. So my thinking there was that in various different, more, shall we say, theologically or politically driven groups, image making kind of like may strengthen that political interpretation or that theological interpretation. But it becomes a distraction because we are arts-orientated animals. So we look at the arts, we look at the fashion, we look at the jewelry, we look at the key groupthink phrases. And we start to develop a belief or an understanding as to what these people are really about. When in fact, maybe even in some cases, not in all, but in some cases, they themselves don't know what they're about. And in the end, for some people, the imagery, the ideas, the emotional attachments to various different aspects of the fashion, the tradition, the imagery, or the rest of that, can start doing the thinking for them. Because the sense of identity is affected by the people you're hanging out with, what they look like, how they dress, how they talk, what you read, alright, and what the apparent values are within those various different cultures. So if, let's say, in my case, I was actually looking out for healing for my body, which of course I did not get from these people, I myself became swept up somewhat in the imagery and the rest of that, and feeling excited that there was some kind of like great future when everyone in the world will start thinking the same way that I do. Obviously that's probably a bit dangerous, but never mind. But I think that that's what people within face-to-face spiritual cultures tend to think anyway. You may have noticed that at various different times in your own life, you've probably been different things. Okay, with your work, with your faith, with your political leanings, whatever. And you do these things because at that time in your life you think you're right. Okay? You think it's right to do this, so you go and do it. Or maybe it's like your identity itself steers your reasoning and thoughts and feelings, rather than actually objectively looking at what's going on and making a rational decision. Most of us humans are actually relatively incapable of making rational decisions because we're emotional creatures and we think a lot, not only with thoughts, but also with emotion. And when we're thinking with emotion, we're not really thinking, we're reacting. Does that make sense? So I'd like to encourage you to think about what is driving your thoughts, or your thinking that you have thoughts. Okay, because we don't always have thoughts, we have emotions associated with ideas. And the strength of the emotion affects how we perceive the idea, or the tone of the emotion, and its associations then affects our ideas, thoughts and feelings. Do you want to have more control over yourself? Do you want to have more control over your life? Okay? In that case, I would think more about intention rather than tradition. I would think much more about why people around you are thinking the way they are, and what it is that you should be thinking, and how you should be expanding your knowledge base. Does this make sense? Bit of a ramble, I know, but just bear with me. when it comes to filtering out a lot of the psychological debris that we accumulate as a result of coming across people from various different faith backgrounds or traditions or whatever it is, or politics and the rest of that, it's always very hard. Because these people are saying stuff and they're doing stuff, and part of you thinks, oh, someone's saying stuff and doing stuff, so therefore it must be worthwhile, or it must be true. Not always the case. Mindfulness itself, when I started doing mindfulness, was it about a year and a half ago? I can't remember now. That was a very useful, interesting training, because it made me look at what thoughts were going through me and trying to work out why they were there, and indeed also being able to disregard them so that I was then free to be able to think. So maybe when you're thinking about your meditation practice, you'll need to have some time when you're practicing the stuff you're interested in, and some time to practice mindfulness so that you end up with a balance and you don't end up going essentially crazy. I could probably sit here and talk to you for a long period of time. I've probably already done that. But there may be something in what I've said today which could be doing you some good. Okay? There's nothing wrong with having aesthetic looking toys. Okay? But we have to remember that it's designed that way for particular types of people who have particular ideas, resonate well with those symbols, and so on and so forth. This style of talking board, I don't think is designed for more serious experimentation, although I might use it in that way if I see fit. Alright? I think that sometimes we need to use artistic interpretation itself, because artistic interpretation can help us to think about things in a different way, or develop different emotional reactions to various things. So yes, there is a merit to art, but if we get too lost in the art, then we lose track of things like mindfulness and intention and the importance of well thought through intention, either receiving or transmitting. That's the way I'm seeing things today. If any of this makes any sense, let me know in the comment section. And if it doesn't make any sense to you at all either, there's a comment section there for that as well. Okay, it's just write stuff down. Don't forget to favorite, share, click the bell and all that kind of stuff, because hey presto, I'm not really a bad guy, okay? I go through my dark moments, okay? But you like that, don't you? Yes. You do, don't you? Yes.